But first, our top story is with the future of Convoy and how this tech stack might live on. Editorial director Rachel Premack joins us for the latest on this story. Rachel, pleasure to get to catch up with you again. A lot going on when you went, after you got married, took a honeymoon.
Yep.
And then unfortunately, everything happened.
Yeah, really just towards the end, everything happened. I was like, well, I'll be back in a few short days, so I'm ready to get back into it.
So as you look at it, right now we've got at least one definitely viable suitor, but who is up for possibly buying Convoy's tech stack here?
So it seems like the only confirmed potential buyer is Flexport. They are the ones that seem to be having these active conversations with Convoy right now. There is a few other large legacy companies that were potentially also looking at Convoy. I don't think any of those names have been reported out yet, but it seems like the one in these most active conversations with Convoy is indeed Flexport.
And looking at what's inside this tech stack, I'm assuming if we have a buyer, are they going to get the whole kit and caboodle, so to speak, or are we going to see a situation where maybe it's best for Convoy to kind of mix and match a la carte style as they're looking for folks to get this stuff?
Yeah, I think in the case of Flexport, what they already work or have worked with Convoy for years to match Flexport customers with Convoy's domestic trucking network. So something that's really just on the ground, the sort of the trucking network that Convoy has access to, that's certainly something that would make a lot of sense for Flexport. I imagine a lot of Convoy's shippers that they already work with, that would make sense to kind of capture that customer base and try to integrate them into a larger sort of partnership with Flexport. But things like Convoy's trailers, physical assets, it doesn't seem like that's really something that's of interest to, these buyers more generally.
One of the interesting things that catches my ear, at least, about this is, of course, Ryan Peterson came back to Flexport on the pretense that he was there to try and make the company profitable, make cuts, and all of a sudden now they're in talks to make what is no doubt a large purchase if they're going here. Is there any reaction from Ryan in terms of how they're playing this out, if indeed that's what their intention is, and just the precariousness of this deal overall, given what Ryan has said in the past?
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit strange considering we just heard from Ryan Peterson that Flexport needs to cut its spending, that under Dave Clark, it was just, buying, expanding too fast, expanding into all of these sort of areas that weren't profitable. And obviously right now, freight brokerage is not exactly a money-making scheme to be into right now. On the other hand, the market will eventually turn, and it might make sense to have this increased truck capacity. Eventually, that's going to be something that shippers are actually going to be looking for trucking capacity. Maybe not now, but in the future, eventually that's going to be a strategic area to be involved in. But yeah, it is certainly interesting, and it does contrast quite a bit with what we heard just a month ago from Flexport, that they need to cut their spending considerably. On the other hand, it appears that the terms that Flexport would be able to acquire Convoy with would be favorable, according to the person familiar who I spoke to.
And looking at a timeline as well, we'd heard for the past few months prior to Convoy going under that they were looking for a buyer. They brought in a firm. Would we be on an accelerated timeline now that there's nobody left, or do we have a little bit more runway with the team that is still there keeping the stack on live while they're looking for buyers?
I imagine it's going to be a bit more accelerated now that they've, officially run out of cash and have had to lay off most of that staff. Maybe before it was, kind of dabbling and looking around, but maybe not quite as urgent because they haven't already made the headline saying, "Oh, we've gone bankrupt," or "Oh, we've run out of money," rather.
Yeah. So looking at this deal for Flexport, if everything goes through and if everything pans out as looks like it will, how does this change Flexport?
Well, I think it would certainly solidify their domestic trucking capacity, which is something that they were previously expanding under Dave Clark, and kind of, now I guess they're going to keep expanding it.
Yeah.
I think it would certainly, make Flexport sort of that end-to-end supply chain partner that it seems like they were looking to become, rather than just being just a freight forwarder or just something more involved in the global trade side.
And part of me thinks the spicy headline may be the era of the digital freight broker is passing, or kind of like how you have the change from Triassic to Jurassic periods. What does this mean for these other digital freight brokers? Are there any other concerns, or is this an isolated incident based on lending practices and, financial mechanics more so than the fundamentals of the business?
Yeah, I think from people I speak to, it kind of seems like this is just the first to come in, the coming months, if not coming weeks, for other digital freight brokers to also wind down. I think a lot of the issues that hit Convoy were, quite pronounced at Convoy. If we look at the fact that Convoy received, hundreds of millions of dollars in funding, and they did receive, a lot of that hype in the digital freight brokerage industry, that definitely made them, kind of paradoxically more likely to collapse or more exposed to certain issues, because they were able to grow really fast. And, now during this downtime, they've got too much capacity and maybe not the right sort of financial mechanics to make all of these lanes profitable. So I think looking ahead, the Convoy is not going to be the first digital or only digital freight brokerage to shut down. We're already seeing that traditional brokers have had to scale back significantly. We've already seen major layoffs at a lot of these digital freight brokers. So I don't think, unfortunately, that Convoy will be an isolated incident. And I think we're going to have to keep following those headlines in the next few weeks.
In the end, though, specific to, bless you.
Zoom tight.
In the end, specific to Convoy, was this a case? Again, this was a company that came online very quickly, like you said, raised a lot of money very fast. Was this a situation as well where maybe they just flew too close to the sun and couldn't take it, or really is this just simply economic conditions that played out their fate?
Yeah, I would say it's a mix of both, because, regardless in trucking, you're always going to have a downtime. There's always going to be a recession. It's a very cyclical industry. So not planning for a cyclical downturn would be a big flaw if you were going to be running a freight startup of any kind or any variety. On the other hand, the freight downturn has been going on for about a year and a half. So if companies are still around, I guess, at this time, then all they have to do is keep waiting. And this downturn has lasted perhaps longer than a lot of people have thought it would, especially when you look at the fact that the consumer economy hasn't really been quite as challenged as I think you would have expected, given, these continued interest rate hikes and inflation. I think people were expecting that this trucking downturn would reverse soon, and it has not, unfortunately.
Well, Rachel, it's always a pleasure to have you on as well. Reminds me of an Appalachian saying, it's like outrunning a bear. You just simply can't be the slowest. Rachel, thanks again for coming on the show. Going to be excited to see the developments as we get more information.
Thanks for having me on.